Something fun about me is that I really love alternate histories. So, I'd love to make alternate history videos. The problem is, I I just don't know enough really. I know lots of stuff about history, but I don't really know enough to make my own made up history. So, I can just do it for the series because I am the one person in the world who knows the most about this series probably. I hope, hopefully. So I thought about the 7 Years' War in my series, which was like 1817 to 1824, I think. It made up series times, which is not when the 7 Years' War happened in real life. And I made this map of if the Spanish team won the war. I made it a while ago. It was like quite a long time ago. So I'm not sure if I agree with everything on the map, but it's probably alright. And I thought, you know what, for fun, why not just go through loads of the stuff that's happened here and see what the consequences would look like. So I'm going to try and do that. I mean, it should be a lot of fun. Something to note about this is that I'm going to be treating it the way I would treat a normal video. So in my series, it's not like everything happens exactly as I think it realistically would, and that's kind of the same in real life because history isn't like realistic, I suppose. There's things that have gone differently to how you'd think they would happen, and that's a good thing, I suppose. So that's going to be happening here. Kind of, there's going to be two major countries really in this bit, which would be Spain and Sweden, I think, well, and Turkey and southern India potentially. But more these two. I think that's the dynamic I would probably cover if I'd made these two countries win the 7 Years' War. And yeah, I think we're going to start with that. So, I don't really have a timeline for this video. It's kind of strange. But we can go over some of the stuff from the peace treaty, like England has lost their entire empire, we've got the southern French establishing a colony in Texas, Spain's taken over most of the Dutch Empire, the Swedish have a huge North American colony, and they've also got loads of other stuff over here in North America. Germany and Poland have just both been rebuked, and Poland's lost control of the old Slovakian country, who's now back. I mean, they're kind of a country that doesn't really exist as an ethnicity anymore in the map in real life. Well, in the modern map. So that's kind of cool. Connaught's doing very well, and you know, those are the cool stuff. The only thing Turkey lost was this Benghazi colony of theirs, whilst Ukraine lost some of their northern land. And yeah, I think lots of things would say the same. Like Turkey's probably going to invade this stuff, but something that might change would be a civil war in England, because England's not doing great. And I think something that I would definitely do is have England have a civil war and potentially get invaded by Ireland. As Irish troops will cross the border over here into England. It's not the right map. Hello. That's not the right map either. Irish forces will cross the border into England due to dissatisfaction with the population, but equally this could have a lot of funding and roots from the Spanish because they were very worried about the English, who before seemed like they were on the rise and going to become like the next top power. So a huge rebellion in the south, which could be Wessex, and probably based in Wessex stuff, could appear and be funded by the Spanish, with their allies over here in Ireland helping to invade the north. I'm kind of expecting there would have been some point where like blah 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 blah, the Spanish and the Swedish now hate each other and they're kind of competing for domination over Europe. And Sweden, I think I'd probably play into the fact that Sweden is trying to basically recreate the Danish Empire of old. Also, this is like an old cities map, so it might not be quite as accurate because it doesn't have all the cities that I've put on, which is what accurate means. Anyway, so Sweden's going to try and recreate the Danish Empire, and to those ends, they're going to invade over here into eastern England, a bit like this, you can't really see it, but blah blah blah, this gets invaded, and there'll be a cool peace treaty. Alright, so we have the Swedes taking over all this territory, which is the old Danish colony stuff. Apart from that, the rest of the lines are just kind of random, with the Irish taking over this northern area. Down here in the southern part, we see Wessex returned into existence, but also given a load more southern Welsh land, so that looks pretty cool. And then this just random central area, it definitely could have gone to the Irish and made their colony look like that, but I'd rather went to Sweden. Actually, this looks nicer. Anyway, yeah, as I said before, there's not much reason to any of this, but Wessex is here, and I assume they've become a Spanish puppet state, which means the Spanish alliance now includes Spain, southern Italy, southern France, which is more kind of Savoy but bigger, Ireland, and then Wessex. That's weird. Colonially, I guess we're into that a bit, but I think southern France are kind of unnecessary, really. So I might probably just get rid of them. That's what I kind of feel like I might do, just because we don't really need them. They are definitely an interesting country, with like the colony in Texas and stuff, but I don't think there's much more that they would do, and they definitely could be competing with the Southern Italians. So yeah. Alright, so I think it'd be likely this country would be defeated. Sorry, there's weird video, lots of breaks. As Southern Italians have claims on their territory and stuff, and it's advantageous to Spain as well. So I did draw a partition of this because I made a map like a really long time ago of what I would think it would look like by the time World War One came around, and I had this country fall apart then. I'm not sure if I did it now, I would think the same thing, but I'm still gonna go with the ideas from before. So both countries be convinced into attacking this country. Poor Savoy, they look kind of cool and definitely could have survived, but I think having too many allies in the same area would annoy me. So the Spanish move into the south and quickly take the capital city, because at this point Spain is by far not by far, but I would say probably the strongest country in the world. I haven't shown you how much colonialism is going to happen in America, so they'd absolutely move straight through western side of the country, whilst Italy would take over Corsica and the entire eastern side of the country. This nation is, at this point, basically Italy. There's definitely some bits they don't have, but unlike in the Northern 7 Years' War, there's no northern Italy that's beaten, but it gets aid from the Turkish in defeating southern Italy, so there's no Turkish presence in the south of Italy. We would see the Spanish conquer all this territory. I'm not sure if I spoiled anything there. Probably not really. And the Italians get all this. I can't quite remember if this is more than what the Italians got in real series. I don't remember. But I think you guys, no, they didn't. I don't really remember. Anyway, Spain looks kind of weird here, and Italy looks kind of cool. But there's definitely going to be more things we change about Europe. And one of those things is France, who I think would absolutely just fall apart in this scenario. Another point is, going along with this idea that it's kind of story based, and like it's an alternative way the series could have gone. I think I would get rid of the countries that were really dominant in real life following the 7 Years' War, like France and England and some other ones. So I think France falling here would make a lot of sense, and they might fall to similar stuff as England, as the country promised them like colonial possessions and all this sort of stuff. And we can see an invasion by Spain and their allies. The Spanish forces move into this pretty powerful. At this point, they're like definitely a middle country, which they were, I would say, at the start of the 7 Years' War. But at this point, they're more of like a weak middle country. Not super weak, but yeah, they're not as dominant as they were before. And yeah, I think Wessex as an ally of the Spanish would also invade, and it's going to throw back to the fact that early Wessex owned this bit and this bit of France. So yeah, I think these are the borders I'm going to go with. My first, as I said before, I made that other map of what I think it could look like. I don't really think about much of the lore and how these different things would happen. I was just like, yeah, probably that might happen. I didn't have Wessex existing. I always had it as like a thought, maybe we could have a Wessex, but I didn't think about it fully. But so I don't have their borders. I just had it all go to Spain, which looks really cool, but I didn't really agree with. Anyway, moving up here to the north, I think there's a really fun possibility of something we could do in this region, and that is the formation of a low union. There's no chronological order to what's happening here, and that's probably something I should have maybe added, but it doesn't matter. In the real series, there was a union between Wallonia and Belgium, and they formed this cool pink country here. However, I think in this timeline, with Belgium having lost to their imperial stuff, but they're still like a strong country, they're probably quite rich, they might also join this country. So it's now 3 nations strong. I think just because this is quite a cool idea, although it looks pretty awesome already, we could add the Rhineland country and the Alsace country. We could probably say that, they're scared of Sweden and Italy and Spain and stuff. So we have this absolutely huge low union country, which is definitely a top 10 power, because look at them, they're really cool looking. But they're not colonial power yet. I mean, colonially, we're going to get to it. I keep saying that, but we will get to it. Anyway, going back to Italy then, we need to resolve the other conflicts that Italy gets involved in, like here in Croatia. I don't think the timeline's changed enough that Hungary and Italy wouldn't both declare war on Croatia, so we're going to see the absolute destruction of this country as Italian forces move in over here in the west. Obviously, they take over all this area, and probably they move faster than the Hungarians due to Spanish aid. I think in real life they did as well, due to the aid of their allies. And then over here in the east, of course, Hungarian troops are going to move in and finally connect up to the coast, as they really wanted to, and take over all of this stuff. So there you go, have a pretty cool looking Hungary. Right, so the Italians take over all of this territory, and the Hungarians get this. The main notable thing here is that Italy gets more than the Italians in real life did, and to be honest, I think this is an argument I used a lot, but the fact is that Spain is the strongest country in the world, so they can kind of just be like, hey, you're going to give my friend more land, or else I'm just going to brutally hurt your country, because you know we can do it, we did it before, and you're also fighting alongside a lot of other really strong colonial powers, so yeah, give me what I want. Shut up. And Hungary looks about the same anyway, so it's fine. We're looking at Italy, but we can kind of make their borders better with another war that happened during this time in the real series, and that's the war with Switzerland. Switzerland is an extremely weak country at this point, and yeah, they're going to get absolutely folded by the Italians, just making their borders look a little bit better. So that's nice. Austria didn't get invaded for ages, until the Cold War, so I think they're staying the same. And the big thing with Russia is, of course, the Russian Unification War, and there's lots of other things that happen in Asia, such as the filling of this land. Orange China, just before World War I, goes on a rampage, conquering. When do they conquer this country? No, wait, no, they don't. No, they conquer these two countries. No, they don't. I'm stupid at my series. This is a while ago, though. It's like episode 60. They move into Guangxi and they conquer that, and then there's like Sichuan and these three guys, and they form an alliance. And then China goes in and they invade and defeat all these countries pretty handily. And we see a union appear in the north between all four of these countries, which forms Blue China, it's all blue. And then China absolutely wrecks them. But they come back and ultimately win and kind of form like the greatest China empire that has ever existed in the series. Except maybe these guys, because they were kind of strong too. And I think that will all go the same here. So that India existing, they're not going to have the India War, because in the real timeline, what happened was that Spain was defeated. These guys invaded this small Spanish city that they owned, and that led to Andalusia and Galicia getting the rest of the colonial powers to invade India, and they got loads of colonies down here in Indonesia and destroyed the Indian colonial empire. However, here that's not going to happen, and instead, number one, the alliance will stay together between all four of these countries. And I think with Turkish expansion, it's likely we can see Oman being added to the alliance, which is a really cool idea. And yeah, they're just going to continue what they're doing. So that's pretty interesting. And they're going to be a big rival to Spain in terms of rankings, but I don't think like actually they would be a rival, because they're both going to trade through the city and stuff. So it's all pretty cool. Otherwise, most of the wars would go the same. So let's go to colonization. Alright, so the borders in North America, I think, would stay much the same as the ones in the actual series, in that the lines would be too different. However, I think the Swedish, with their much more powerful country compared to the Norwegians, would have more territory than the Norwegians got in real life, against the Irish, who are a lot weaker than the English or British of our series. Sorry, they went between Irish and English. I don't know. Weird. But also the Spanish, I forgot to mention before, will have conquered the southern French Savoy colony over here. Actually, I can really stay on that side of the brush, because over here in South America, no one is going to contest Spanish power. I, at some points, did consider making the Southern Indians cross the Pacific Ocean to go colonize here in South America, which would have looked cool, but I think, in a way, with Spain being the strongest country in the world, and no one else being in South America, and in our series we didn't have any other countries who had interest in South America, the Carthaginians and the French taking Spanish colonies, and then the other two countries to colonize South America, both being old Spain. Yeah, I just had them take over all of Spain. So that's what that would look like, and then we can head over to Australia, where things are basically going to be the same, almost. The first bit of colonizing Australia will go pretty much the same, I think, and the borders wouldn't exactly be the same, and it's definitely something I should really touch on, but I just don't really care enough. So I just copied them from the real map before it happened. Also, I don't remember. Yeah, okay. However, both of these areas, there's going to be no English colonial empire, and there could be a lowlands colonial empire. However, I don't think they'd have the same reach as some other countries. So alternatively, in this colony, I think it would be likely to be the the Spanish who lay claim to this territory, moving in from South America, go across the Pacific, and they would take over all Tasmania. It's old English colony. There's also like the best bit of Australia, so it makes sense that they would get this bit. They also take over all these other Pacific islands that were taken over by the British Empire, and then of course the western side is going to go to the Swedish, who take over more extremely horrible territory to live in, which is Western Australia. It's not actually that bad, but it's pretty hot there. That looks really cool. I like those colours. Anyway, that's pretty fun. Asia, as I said before, isn't going to be too different, so I might just copy and paste all of this stuff onto a different map, which will take a really long time, but we can do it. Whoops. Alright, so I transferred it over to episode 63, which is the division of Africa, the Berlin Conference episode. I think there's one thing that I maybe forgot to mention, or I just did by myself, which is with the Turkish invasion of this old country that's right here. Instead of giving this city of Medina over to the Polish, I think they give it over to the Swedish. And it's also kind of story important as the Turkish and the Swedish both oppose the Spanish, so that kind of makes sense. And I think they could use it as a device to get them to be more allied and stuff. So I think that's probable. Anyway, we can go to the division of Africa, which is going to look fairly the same. I'm going to use the same sort of lines for most of it, but there will be lots of differences. First off, the Spanish will be taking over a lot of land. Basically, they'll get the entire Andalusian colony over here, and then all of the Carthaginian land will be given to them, as Carthage was already beaten in the 7 Years' War, and there's no reason why Spain would really count them as a proper country who needs to be respected and stuff. So they would just take over their entire colony. That's all Spanish now, or entire country, I mean, and also all the Andalusian stuff. So there you go. Spain's pretty huge, but that's not all that we're taking. I'm using the borders I drew a while ago, but next up would be the Swedish, who get all of this stuff. I'm not sure if it's quite accurate, but I think it's pretty close. I don't know if I love it though. So is this province accurate? I don't know. Where's the provinces? Hello. Yeah, it is. So I guess maybe this is what the colony would look like. It doesn't look amazing, but this is kind of the point of the alternate histories. They don't have to look amazing. Anyway, the Turkish, they're kind of doing something that makes sense for Turkey, which is taking over all of this territory over here in Egypt. I mean, like, by how close it is and stuff, that makes a lot of sense. So this all becomes Turkish territory, so that's pretty cool. And then the rest of this, obviously, will become Italian territory, as the strange thing about this timeline is there are now two Libyas. They could have potentially united or something, but it doesn't matter. And once again, I think I just went, yeah. Basically, Spain's like, hey, let these guys have some land. So that's what happens. But I think the Turkish will probably take over this stuff. So, and then there's some weird lines down here. I don't know. Strange borders.